I define human connection as the energetic rapport we're experiencing right now that we've all experienced when we can see, feel, and discover ourselves mirrored in another human being. And there's a reason that says see, feel, discovered. There's something called the social penetration theory that says the more time you and I spend together, the more information about yourself you'll disclose and I will disclose. And we naturally do it as human beings because we're wired to want connection. Connection makes us feel more calm and safe.
Welcome everyone to another podcast episode. Today I will be talking with Simone Heng. She inspires people to connect in a world thirsty for connection. A human connection specialist and former international broadcaster, she has over 15 years of experience around the world. Connection has always been her life's work. She has spoken to audiences of thousands and for clients that include Meta, Google, TEDx, and the United Nations. Her work has been featured in Vogue, Elle, the South China Morning Post, CNN, and many more. Simone's debut book on human connection, Secret Pandemic, The Search for Connection in a Lonely World, is a Singaporean bestseller and an Amazon US #1 bestseller. Stay tuned for Simone's story on the magic created by simple human connection and the impact this has on high-performance teams. Simone, I'm so excited having you here. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. It's so beautiful.
So let's first get to know Simone. So can you tell us about your background, about your journey?
Sure. So I was born here in Singapore and grew up in Australia, and then also lived, like you, many places. I lived in Dubai for 5 years working on air as a broadcaster. I lived in Switzerland as well, and then Singapore a couple of times. This is my second time back to Singapore, and I work as a professional speaker around the topic of human connection, and I've just authored a book in the space, and I also run a community here in Singapore called the Courageous Speaking Community, which is to teach the everyday person how to be a stronger communicator, and that's part of my mission to see Singaporeans own their voice and speak up a little bit more.
Wow. So I read your book, and you have a nice story. So maybe you can tell us, how did you came into human connection?
Sure.
Maybe you can tell us the story.
Sure. So obviously when I was broadcasting, you were using communication skills, but I always felt there was this huge gap between communication and connection, okay? They're related, but they're not the same thing. So I was seeing how there was a lot of disconnection inside an organization that I was working in the media versus an organization I'd worked for before, where Virgin Radio in Dubai was very connected as a team, and so we created really great content. So I was seeing the correlation between a disconnection in a team and disconnection in content, and then at the same time as this was happening, my mother, who has a very rare degenerative disease, was also having issues remembering parts of her own life and connecting to herself and others around her because of this dementia. And so everywhere I looked, this subject of human connection was staring me in the face, except I hadn't connected the dots. It took a mentor, a gentleman you might know called Frederick Heron, to literally say, Simone, when you walk into a room, like, people just want to connect with you, you're a connector. And it was when he sent me off to research human connection. I did interviews just like you're doing of people I believed to be human connection superheroes, taxi drivers, teachers at schools where the kids have autism on all scales of the spectrum, people like that it was clear to me that this topic was so much deeper than how other people had been speaking about it, or deeper than I even knew in terms of its impact in my life. And you really see that through the book, is that it's deeply personal to me, this topic.
Wow. So what was the moment, the tipping point that you felt like, okay, wow, there's something here for me? What was that moment?
So I ran a contest, and this is in my TED Talk. I ran a contest on the radio, give away tickets to a superhero movie. And I said, message in what superpower you'd like to have and why. And this girl called in, and her name was Mei Xuan. I'll never forget it. She said, I wish I had the superpower of being able to connect with people, and maybe, nowadays people connect, but really connect with people one-on-one. And I thought, and she was obviously about 10 years younger than me, so she'd be 28 now by the time she's like 24, 25. And I remember thinking, how is something that I take for granted, that I've had my whole life, this skill of no matter what pain is inside of me, being able to connect with people, how is this now considered a superpower? And then, of course, I started doing research and realizing that, the Signal Loneliness Index, Gen Z are the loneliest of all generations, whereas in the past it would have been elderly people. And so what is making young people with devices to connect to them more than they've ever been connected? What is making them feel lonely? And that's when the penny dropped. I was like, oh, my mentor was right, because I was a bit of a disbeliever. I was like, really? And my mentor was kind of introverted, so I thought maybe he just thinks I'm connected because I'm extroverted and he's super introverted. But actually, he was so right, and that was when the penny dropped. It's like, there is some research in this that needs to be done.
Okay, so let's understand better, so what is human connection?
So I define human connection as the energetic rapport we're experiencing right now, that we've all experienced when we can see, feel, and discover ourselves mirrored in another human being.
Wow.
And there's a reason that says see, feel, discovered. There's something called the social penetration theory that says the more time you and I spend together, the more information about yourself you disclose and I will disclose. And we naturally do it as human beings because we're wired to want connection. Connection makes us feel more calm and safe, right? So if you sat us in a room together, a jail cell, even you see this in movies, happens to jail cells all the time. People, even if they've got opposing views, if you just place them in proximity, eventually they would connect. And why this is really important in my definition is this part about see and feel. The initial connection you meet with people when you're building rapport, you are just seeing and feeling. And when you move to discover, that's vulnerability. That's the disclosure part.
Wow.
So that's when we really get authentic connection, and it must be kind of done in that order. Yeah.
Well, so help us to understand what is the problem today in terms of human connection. We live in a world that is more connected than ever, but still there's a lot of disconnect between people.
Yeah, loneliness.
Can you tell us, yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I always say we're more logistically connected than ever and more emotionally disconnected than ever. So it's a paradox. And so we're lonely for a few reasons. Firstly, there was a pandemic that just ended, and so all of our social skills have atrophied, so everyone's a bit awkward. We're lonely because we're using more and more devices. So again, the innate social skills that we've been born with are not getting exercised as much. Yeah. So we're finding new ways to connect with people. The third way is that people are using, particularly Gen Z, using technology as the destination rather than the way station. So technology should be your way station to connect with people and filter who you might get along with and move you to an in-person meeting. However, if you use it as the destination, that means you never get to that meeting and you just chat online forever. And once that person gets boring, you just shift to another person that you just talk idly to forever. Yeah. It's not going to satiate you with the kind of human connection that we're wired to crave and that we need for our well-being.
Well, and what are the consequences of that? What are the impacts of that, the cost of that? So
you often hear that people that are strongly socially connected will outlive lonely people, or loneliness is more deadly than, than obesity and smoking. This is very common to hear these facts thrown around. But why that actually is, to explain the science of why, is that because we evolved in tribes, we very quickly equated safety with numbers. So the people in the tribe fed us food if there was, low food availability, shared the food with us, kept watch over us while we slept at night, protected us from foreign tribes and saber-toothed tigers. So if we were cast out of that tribe for any reason, we would not last very long. We would get a fight or flight response through our body, cortisol would be running through our veins, and to this day, that cave person brain lives in our head. And when we are disconnected from people or we are lonely, that fight or flight, that anxiety is actually still happening. And most of us would have experienced this during COVID. If you didn't have good sleep during COVID, one of the first markers of loneliness, Dr. Louise Hawkley has found, is micro awakenings in your sleep. And that is to do with the fact there's no other tribes people there to wake up in the night and keep watch for different members of the tribe as they slept. So if you were cast out, you would have to wake up and look out for a saber-toothed tiger for yourself. So it's kind of incredible that we live in this digitally connected world, but those physiological responses still live within us. And we still equate being safe with being connected. So when you're lonely, it is those stress hormones going through your body over and over again chronically. So for people who are lonely for a long period of time, that are damaging your immunity.
Oh my God.
And if you look everywhere, in the world, for example, what they've found is men go wide and shallow with their connections, and women go narrow and deep. And this is important because one of the very big signifiers of the kind of connection you need, because not all connection is built alike, okay? All connection is good unless it's a toxic connection, but it's not all built alike. The connection that you really need, that you must make sure you have in place, is the kind of person you can be truly vulnerable with, that you can call in a crisis, okay? You need those people. And women seem to invest more in that. So you'll actually see the statistic that everywhere in the world, except for the blue zones, women will outlive men 5 to 10 years. And they think that this is to do with how women connect. So my point is, these are the consequences of not investing in your social connections.
That's huge.
It's huge. It's your lifespan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now if we move into the workplace, so what is happening in terms of human connection? What is happening today at the workplace?
Yeah, so I'm just starting my research into a new keynote about a connection of culture. And look, I think particularly here in Singapore, we have a huge issue with workplace toxicity. And obviously, I'm a permanent resident, but all my family and largely a lot of my friends are local. And I worked at a local organization, so I'm more probably tethered to that. And I can say in local organizations, there is a huge challenge with exploitative work hours, hierarchy and backstabbing and bullying within organizations. And it's not taken care of the same way you're made to be accountable for it in America, for example. Like you can go to HR in these local organizations. What I'm hearing is that HR is on the side of the organization, not of the individual. So there's very little that can be done in it, but of course people need to make a living. Singapore is expensive, as we hear over and over again. And what is very clear is that if you want to kill innovation, productivity, and have awful attrition rates at your organization, don't do something about connection. If you want to continue to have product that looks like this standard, don't invest in human connection in your organization, right? You must invest in building a culture of connection and making people feel included and having a sense of belonging. If you want to retain the top talent, we see this issue in the States right now with the Great Resignation. People want to work at a pleasant place to work.
Yeah.
And also, one thing is clear. I worked in a creative field my whole life, from the time I first started working. And what's really clear is fatigued people cannot be creative. The brain just cannot be creative when it's burnt out. Now, if you take burnout simply, the logistics of burnout by being overworked and exploited, and you mix that with toxicity and bullying, which means that fight or flight response from feeling alone, you get someone who's in lizard brain all the time. And when we're in that lizard brain, we don't activate the parasympathetic nervous system. That's where you get all the good things, right? The oxytocin is released. It's what we develop for building trust in others. So by having an exploitative, toxic workplace, you can't release that trust hormone in your employees to allow them to trust each other. How do you work together on a project when you can't even trust your colleague not to stab you in the back, to deliver something on time? It's a complete, it's a complete saboteur of productivity, innovation, everything. If an organization wants to have optimal output, it absolutely needs to look at building a connected culture. That means making everyone feel they're welcome. That means people in this hierarchy that we see in Asia, very firm hierarchy, right? Top-down management style, looking into how that can change. I mean, maybe I'm not being realistic, but that I would love to see that happen. But at least those leaders allowing themselves to be more approachable. What you normally see in that Asian structure, having worked in an organization like that, was there would be fear to go to people at the top, and people at the top not being vulnerable, so that you can't connect with your employees when you lead like that. And so all of these things need to be looked at. And if you want better outcomes from your teams, create a culture of connection.
The problem is big.
It's
the problem
big.
is big, yeah. Yeah, and so you've been working now on human connection, and you published your book, Secret Pandemic. So maybe you can tell us a bit about the journey with your book. Also tell us about, so what are the solutions that you research and that you would like to share with people?
I think the number one thing that we can all do right now in this moment that actually ironically doesn't involve other people in terms of the solutions is to work on our self-connection.
Yeah.
We cannot connect well with others, particularly if you're a leader in an organization. You must have self-connection. I have had coaching clients, C-suite or other, who if I ask them, how are you feeling right now after this session, could not even find me the words to explain. So imagine not having that feedback loop between what's happening in your body or what's happening in your emotions or your thoughts to even communicate that, which means there's an internal disconnection happening. So how can you schedule in your calendar as leaders time to sit and work on yourself? I've just started doing meditation after many years of resisting meditation. I don't know why I resisted it. It's like the best thing ever in my life right now. But what I know for sure is that when I activate that parasympathetic nervous system, I can release the hormones that make me happier and create better trust between me and other individuals. So it means more open listening, and leaders need to do that because leadership is lonely. I've never had less people ask me how I am since I became the leader of my own organization. You know, when I was a DJ, you're very much with the people. Once people see you get a little bit of success, they really do kind of stop asking. So I understand at a very tiny point, you know, my company's tiny, but how a leader of a large organization must feel day in, day out, getting people bringing them their problems and no one asking the leader how they are. And so I would challenge the leaders watching this to have an hour a month with yourself. Do something that you love that is grounding, walking in nature, walk your dog, meditate, paint, whatever it is that's calming, grounding, where your thoughts can become aware, and start asking those questions like, how do you actually feel right now? How do you feel about your role? Once you connect better with yourself, sometimes you in the book, I had to go for therapy. Sometimes maybe some therapy is going to help. And then that's going to set you up better for leading, and that's going to have a flow down effect to the organization. And anybody watching this can do that. I wish we're so distracted. And I have like a cottage industry of social media that I produce, and I do all of these things, but I never miss those hours. The more hours I invest in connecting with myself, I'm so much better for other people. And so that would be my number one tip. The journey with the book. I wrote the book during the pandemic, and it was something that I always wanted to do, and it seemed like the perfect time. I did not expect it to be received the way it has been received. I had deep fears, which I'm sure everybody who's about to publish a book has felt deep fears. It's not a safe book. Like, don't read this book if you don't expect to feel something. The whole role of the book was I had read almost every human connection book out there, and none of them actually connected with me. They told me studies, they told me the science, they told me how-to tips, but nothing made me feel less lonely. And so my mission for this was that it would make people feel less lonely, specifically the target audience of local people, which it was targeted for. And the book has now, it's a bestseller here in Singapore. It's a beautiful thing that I thought would never happen, and an Amazon US bestseller in the social science reference category, the hot new release. So it's been a wonderful journey.
Wow. Congratulations on
Thank you, Rodrigo. Thank you for having me here to help promote it. I appreciate you.
So if we now talk about building a high-performance team, so what is the role of human connection on building a high-performance team?
So I probably didn't say it very elegantly before, but the definition of high performance is that they're extraordinary. You know, they're producing great results. So I really think and some organizations do get it and they bring me in to speak to their people, but building that culture of connection is what takes you to the next level. Because here's the thing, if your team likes the environment they're working in and likes the projects they're working on, and how do they like the projects they're working on? Because they have connection with their leaders to talk about the projects, right? There's a psychological safety in that team. They are going to create much greater content. And I saw it in my own life working for Virgin Radio, where we had this thing called collective connection. So there are 3 different types of loneliness, and I'm just going to zero in on this last one, but I'm going to give everybody the model so they can check in with themselves. The first is intimate loneliness, which is where you feel you don't have someone you can be truly vulnerable with. The second is relational loneliness, where you feel you're not part of a social fabric. And the third is collective loneliness, where you don't feel you have a shared vision and people with that vision. So if an organization like what I experienced at Virgin, we knew we were creative mavericks. That was our shared vision. Like, fail all you like as long as what you create is exceptionally entertaining content. That was our mission and our vision. Your team, maybe your company has a vision, but the team itself needs to have a shared vision. And that allows them to feel that they're also connected to something bigger than themselves as well. So that's the first step. Put that in place at your team and work on them connecting with each other, and have a look at who are the sources of toxicity in those teams. So I can say from personal experience in my last workplace, there were definitely a couple of people that were very gossipy and who lived and thrived off that gossip and used that gossip as a currency to move up hierarchy, which I found really bizarre. I thought, oh, Simone, you're too Australian. You find this a lot of effort for what is the effort? All the effort behind this going towards what? But you know, there are people like that in organizations. How can you move them off your team? They will sabotage your high performance. So those are my tips for building high performance teams and creating activities where the team can connect and make sure those activities are inclusive. We've all been to team bonding activities that you feel is for the majority of the team, but not for everyone. You don't feel like you want to be there. So I would suggest using an anonymous survey, like SurveyMonkey, email it out, find what everyone wants to do for the company offsite. Have a real look at who are the people that are not being served by this, and how can you make people feel included in whatever activity it is that you want to do.
Wow, that's so good, so much value. Thank you.
Oh, I hope
thank
so.
you for sharing. No, it's amazing. Do you have any story of any leader that you work that did really well on human connection with their team?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll go back to the Virgin Group because it's really the standout one for me, because it's a really great example of how culture from the leader moves down. So it's rare that an organization of that size with a leader who's so public like Richard Branson, that it's so global. We were in the Dubai office of this brand, and yet we felt so included in this greater Virgin vision. So they have something called Virgin Village that you would all get this email that gives perks to any employee of the Virgin Group globally, which made us feel like even though we're half franchised out, we're still part of this brand that's held in high esteem, and we want to do it credit. And then within that team, I had my first PD, program director there, who was very careful about being involved but not too involved with the team as a leader. So this is really interesting, because when a leader buddies up, and I saw this personally at the last radio station I worked at, when a leader buddies up with selected members of the team and then is not with the rest of the team, they may not realize this. It could be a blind spot, but it makes other people feel really excluded. And so he was with us, but really cognizant of not going to someone's house for a barbecue, there was even, I should tell this story online. You're the first one to get it. At my last
God.
workplace, where the boss at that time organized an entire informal team trip to Bangkok and didn't invite me and one other person, and then told everyone not to put social media photos up so that we, the team members that were not invited, wouldn't see. But obviously, if you say that, that means you're cognizant of the fact this is it's excluding people. So how connected are you as a leader if you see that, but you still choose to do that? And then in the end, she ended up getting taken in because eventually you can't hide on social media. Somebody saw it. And then I was phoned and said, are you okay? How do you feel about it? And I was like, what do you say? It's a terrible thing to feel excluded, like you don't belong. It gives us that fight or flight response. Even if we rationalize, I don't care, it still hurts. And leaders are responsible for creating a culture of inclusion. So you shouldn't be doing things like that. But that would never have happened with that program director I had in Dubai. It was very cognizant of, I will come for the workplace team building thing, but I will duck out at a certain time, or I will not make myself clicky with certain people, which we saw from other people within the organization. So he did a really good job of, within my direct team, managing that. So people felt if anything arose, you could always come in with an equal ear to approach that leader. Meanwhile, the team and everybody on the same rank can connect with each other and golf and all have fun, do whatever you want to do. And I think that was really strategized and really thought about, and that's a connected leader. Someone who spends their time thinking about those things.
Wow, that's an amazing example. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, now I'll have to make a short form video of that. I didn't even know that was in me. Thanks, Rodrigo. This is why you should always say yes to podcasts if you can.
So now if we look at the future, there's so much uncertainty and so many disruptions. How do you see where things are moving, and what do you think it's a skill that leaders, they need to start working so that they can succeed in the future as a leader?
So firstly, I think there should be an acceptance that different generations working under you are going to have different modalities with which they like to connect. So a recent example was given to me by a C-suite friend of mine who a new hire was replying to WhatsApp messages like, okay, HOKAY, which you don't really talk to your leader like that, and had to, as a leader, should kind of coach the new hire, because it's in the new hire's best interest. As that girl or guy moves up the corporate ladder, they're going to have to learn a little bit of corporate communication. But so the first thing is accepting that not only are the modalities different, but you might need to do a little bit of connection teaching them on how to express or write a professional email, or understand that Gen Z loves a WhatsApp, but also Gen Z needs to understand that maybe your leader doesn't want to be WhatsApped. And so these are the issues, but to understand and be open to altering and to speaking with your team about those things, instead of having an attitude of, you must communicate like this, like just being open about it. I think is really important, because this is something with Web 3.0 and with how fast everything is heading, it's going to be exponential. We're going to have to catch our breath in terms of how people are going to change in their connection. So that's number one. Number two, I would say, is do have those in-person days. As I mentioned before, technology is great, but we've learned from the pandemic, we get more of those feel-good hormones from in-person connection. So even if you're working remotely, how can you schedule company offsites, which we're seeing a lot of, and that's where people like you or I come in, or how can you have those bonding days that serve everyone? So that would be my top two things, I would say.
It's I think the disconnect today between generations, it's huge.
It's huge.
I love that you brought that point, and I think I love your solution.
Yeah, and it's a struggle on both sides. It's not, so connection is a two-way street. It's an exchange. It's an energetic rapport, as my definition says. So how can you build an energetic rapport if you're telling another person, in my organization, you must communicate to me like this? I loved the other day, I got someone who potentially wanted to work with me, and she slid into my WhatsApp and she said, Simone, is it okay that I message you here? And I said, thank you so much for asking, but I actually do prefer email because my WhatsApps and my social media DMs are a bit crazy. And it was so beautiful that she asked because, and she's my generation, but normally if I deal with people 10 years younger than me, they will just slide directly into the WhatsApps. Mm-hmm. And that is their modality of working because they want that immediacy. But I'm actually pretty immediate on email anyway. It's more that it just helps me with not having distractions on my phone. Mm-hmm. So, you know, these are the things that we can all, I suppose, be more others. I talk in the book, others driven in a self-driven world. How can you say, would this person like to be communicated with that way? Or what is the modality of communication in the organization? And how can I move myself to that space if I need to, if I really don't like it, then I guess you can choose to work somewhere else. Mm-hmm, and mm-hmm. In the end, I made that choice too because we were all held hostage to like a WhatsApp chat. Yeah. And I found it very, very triggering. Even when you're on leave, you're expected to reply in that chat. And that, for me, that was a marker of a toxic workplace. So I jumped out.
Yeah, and it's nice because it really ties to what you were mentioning before, the importance of self-awareness, of working on the self, the leader, so that then you will be able to better connect and understand their team. Yeah, wow, so nice.
Yes. So yeah. Oh, and we can't be others driven actually if we're stressed. Yeah. So that self-time allows you to be present for people. So you're picking up on all these clues and these nuances of how people are connecting with you, which I think is really vital. If you're a stress leader, you can't do that. You're lizard brain, you're not going to ingest all of those things that are happening in your team. Mm.
Okay, so we are almost getting to the end. I mean, it is so fascinating, this topic.
Oh, thank you. It is. It's the topic that keeps on giving, really.
So you've been on this side, I think, from 15 years, asking so many questions to people. And now, I mean, you've been now in different podcasts and people ask you a lot of questions. Yeah. So my question to you is, what is one question that no one asks you and you would love to answer?
Oh my goodness. Oh, I feel like there are so many. No one asked me, what was the book writing process like? It's interesting, people all, you know, you're celebrating the end product, but nobody says like, what was your biggest struggle or what's a great hack to know, you know, to write your first book? That's, yeah, I would have liked that.
So
yeah.
Can you
okay. I think one of the best things ever was that I had the book coach, and the book coach said, you know, the first 2 hours in the morning are the first 2 hours where your brain, you know, you're going to do the best writing and not to do any more than those 2 hours a day. And that's the way that I was able to get it written. With the first draft in those 4 weeks was during that morning. And for anybody wanting to write a non-fiction book, do not add your research time into the timeline for writing the book. Understand that the research time is separate. So sometimes when people say they took 5 years to write a book, that's because the research time was part of that 5 years. And so it's much faster to write a book if you've done all the research, which I was lucky enough to do for the keynotes. So the research had been done, which made drafting that book just a distillation of the research. So yeah, that would be my answer. How crazy. That was quite fun.
Wow, so I mean, that's it. I mean, I had so much fun and I learned so much about this topic, and keep inspiring others, I mean, to
you
connect
too.
more and keep with that amazing energy.
Thank you for having me, Rodrigo.